Hello, I'm the real life fake wizard, and I have a question. When was the last time a fictional character truly mattered to this generation of kids? I'm not talking about performed well at the box office per se, or trending on TikTok for an afternoon. I'm talking about characters that actually mattered. Like how Mickey Mouse mattered in the 1930s. We had Luke Skywalker pop up in the 80s, Woody and Buzz carried us through the 90s. You know, when kids used to care about the characters on their school lunchboxes and Halloween costumes. Whatever happened to that? Wizard, what about Bluey? Yeah, that's one. We used to have lots, many and many new ones each year. You know, this discussion actually came from a comment I got where I had discussed how Luke Skywalker was ruined by Disney, and the comment was along the lines of, "Wizard, you're yelling at the clouds again. Kids today don't even know who Luke Skywalker is." And I thought, oh gosh, that is very possible. And if we expand on that and research into it, I'm afraid that we'll find it's not even so much that kids don't have heroes anymore today, they don't, but more so, kids don't even have any characters to really connect with anymore. Back in the 2000s, you'd have a movie come out and you'd see merch for that movie all over in every store, bed sheets and fruit snacks and lunch boxes and aisles of heavy, high-quality toys. And the business model behind it worked because kids cared about the characters in the movies and shows. They wanted all that stuff. Hollywood was producing the kinds of stories and characters that kids would argue about on the playground. And we also have to acknowledge that through these characters, kids learned positive moral values like courage and friendship and right and wrong. Even before the kids were old enough to fully understand what these values were, they were planted like seeds for these kids to grow into. For instance, a great example of this is A Bug's Life. There's a specific scene where Hopper monologues about why it's important to hold the ants in a state of fear and terror all the time, and why it's important to punish the ants for challenging them. That even if a single ant gets out of line, it could rally all the ants to get out of line and create an uprising where the grasshoppers lose their dominance over this ant colony. This is a profound concept, and it's laid out fantastically in an animated children's movie from 1998. Impactful and important stories like this in kids' media haven't happened in a very long time. There are no major stories worth caring about, and therefore, there are no characters from those stories for kids to emotionally invest in. And every major corporation knows it. You can see the panic in every decision they make. Disney is remaking every animated classic as a live-action film, partially because they think it's a never-ending cash cow, but primarily because they are terrified of building something original to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars and watching it burn out, making them look bad the way Wish, Strange World, Elio, and Lightyear have. Yeah, to name a few. There's a lot. But we also see this pattern from DC, rebooting their cinematic universe with James Gunn for another do-over. Star Wars keeps announcing projects and canceling them. Marvel is releasing films to half-empty theaters, or worse. And it renders down that Harry Potter seems to be the last franchise standing, and even that is under scrutiny right now, with the most recent trailer being dangerously close to getting ratioed at the time of recording this. Now, as I said, Disney is afraid of making new things. That was proven fact in the most recent shareholders conference with new CEO Josh D'Amaro, who confirmed that Disney intends on only making, and I quote here, new IP inside of old IP, meaning we're getting remakes, reboots, spin-offs, and glup shittos from Disney till kingdom come. But they're all doing it. It's not just Disney here. And inside of that regurgitation of nothing new, audiences are abandoning ship, which means kids are either not experiencing these stories at all, or they're getting the diminished remake version that adjusts the morals to better fit the writer's modern day sensibilities. Are these the actions of companies that know what they're doing? No. These are actions of cowardice, companies running franchise hospice wards, desperately trying to keep old intellectual properties on life support because they have lost the ability to make anything new that's worthwhile for audiences and therefore children. Hollywood has failed the legacy properties they have inherited. They've failed at storytelling for more than a decade. They've sacrificed any kind of originality they've had to pander to fringe audiences. And overall, as we're on the other side of all of that now and can look back and study why, we can confirm Hollywood has failed your children in a lot more ways than one. Join us this summer for the Indie Game Circuit, a 3-day indie game showcase as part of the Southeast Game Exchange in South Carolina. You are cordially invited. Developers, we want to show off you and your games, give you the opportunity to meet gamers, get real feedback, and compete in a friendly competition for Indie Game Awards. Gamers, there will be on-site events and competitions daily where you can win exciting prizes and meet some of your favorite creators and voice actors. Join us this summer at the Southeast Game Exchange in Greenville, South Carolina, July 17th through the 19th. And developers, slots are limited, so apply now. The link is in the description of this video. We will see you there. These companies didn't collapse overnight, right? It took years of terrible decisions to get here, and I think we can attempt to explain these interlocking failures through 3 philosophical shifts about how the entertainment industry thinks about its audience, which has resulted in irreparable damage. The first failure is the most fundamental. Hollywood stopped making content for kids and started making content for adults who used to be kids. At some point in the early 2010s, studios realized that the most reliable audience at that time, asterisk, big asterisk on that, weren't kids. It was adults aged 25 to 45, people with nostalgia, disposable income, and an emotional attachment to franchises that they'd grown up with. So everything pivoted. Marvel movies became increasingly serialized and self-referential and lore-dependent in ways that rewarded viewers who'd spent a decade in the ecosystem but locked out anyone else trying to walk in cold. To enter the MCU now, there are hundreds of hours of homework required before you can see the upcoming Doomsday and have a clue about what's going on. Star Wars has abandoned theatrical films for adult-oriented streaming shows that are all boring. Pixar drifted from stories about childhood wonder, for instance, a toy afraid of being replaced or a fish trying to find his son, and started focusing on adult existentialism and political idealism. You know, 2019's Lion King wasn't exactly made for 6-year-olds, but rather so a 35-year-old could feel like what they felt like in 1994 again, very briefly, before going back home to pay their rent and credit card bills. The business logic here was sound on paper. Adults are the ones with wallets, right? They're the ones paying for things. You might as well capitalize on the generation of adults that actually have great memories emotionally connecting with media because they spend more than kids statistically. Adults buy premium streaming subscriptions. They pay for IMAX. They go to Disney World over spring break with the girlies. They purchase collector-grade merchandise for hundreds of dollars. But the strategy contained a fatal assumption that the kids would still be there when the industry needed them, and they're not. Emotional attachment for fictional characters has a window, and the executives didn't care to consider that back in the 2010s when this shift happened. The window is roughly ages 4 to 12. If you don't reach a child during that window, you don't really reach them at all. Marketing won't work, putting it on streaming won't work. It's already hard enough to break through the noise from the abundance of content available in general. If you didn't give a kid a reason to care while they're a kid, they're not going to care when they're older at all. The second failure is a structural one. The nostalgia inheritance model has been broken. Franchises used to transfer generationally. Dad loved Star Wars. Dad shows his kids Star Wars. Now the kids love Star Wars, and they pass Star Wars on to their kids. This is no longer the case. In 1998, if your father sat you down to watch The Empire Strikes Back, you watched it, because that's what was on TV, and it was a bonding experience between parents and kids, while also being emotionally compelling entertainment. The passive inheritance model thrived in an environment of limited choice. A child's attention was available because there was nowhere else for it to go. That environment no longer exists. A kid in 2026 has access to YouTube, TikTok, Roblox, Minecraft, and an infinite scroll of streaming content on their $1,200 iPad. When dad puts on Star Wars, if he even still likes Star Wars at this point, kids are already too busy doing something else to care. And to restate, the franchises like Star Wars are so cooked that dad doesn't even want to watch them anymore himself. The third failure happens to be the more insidious one. Franchise strip mining has devalued all of the characters themselves. When you reboot, sequelize, prequelize, and spin everything off, you erode the thing that made the characters matter in the first place. Every mediocre Star Wars series makes Luke Skywalker less and less important, and therefore, not worth your time. Every Marvel Disney Plus show dilutes the Avengers just a little bit more. Over on HBO Max, Peacemaker made the James Gunn-verse even more morally gray and negative than the Superman film already established. Every single unnecessary sequel makes it so that the stories themselves are never complete. And if the stories are never complete, then the journey to get there never really mattered. And if that doesn't matter, then there are no stakes. And if there are no stakes, then nothing else matters here at all. And it's just a revenue stream to be dragged until the sea creature stops producing green milk. Kids today aren't given enough credit. Kids are remarkably perceptive about this. They may not have the vocabulary for it, but they can feel the difference between something that exists because someone wanted to tell a story and something that doesn't. They might be kids, but they're not stupid. And what's even crazier is, as the generations change, the younger kids, as they're exposed to social media, they grow up in concerning ways a lot quicker than they should. Kids don't have the chance to just be kids anymore because by 13, they're competing for likes and follows from their TikTok posts. And to be very, very clear, that is not an endorsement. I think it's extremely concerning how much social media is dramatically impacting the kids of today. And it's the parents' fault for not doing anything about it because the parents are just as addicted as their children. Regardless, here, all three failures share a common root. These companies began treating their characters as assets to be monetized rather than relationships to be maintained. Disney stopped asking what would make a child fall in love with this character and started asking, how do we extract maximum revenue from the people who already love this character? If we only looked at revenue, the franchises might appear to be alive. Disney's Parks division generates billions of dollars. Marvel still fills some seats in theaters. If you speak poorly about James Gunn projects, you'll get hateful reactions like this one on Twitter. You know, by the dozens. All dozen of you. The top line looks survivable, and that maintains the shareholders' investments. But underneath the number is a demographic reality that should be terrifying to every single industry executive. And yet, they just don't seem to care. The audiences keeping these franchises alive are aging, childless, and not being replaced. We're talking straight business here on this one. Consider the data on Disney's theme parks, okay? 64% of Disney park visitors now come from households with no children under 18 years old. 42% of guests waiting in line to meet characters, yes, the characters designed for children, are adults between 25 and 40 years old without children. 29% visit without kids at all, and another 30% visit with only adult family or friends. Attendance has been roughly flat for years while per guest spending keeps climbing. What this means is that there are fewer and fewer people going to Disney parks, but the ones who are going are spending more money than if there were more people. And that's because Disney keeps raising the prices. The business model for, like, not even just the theme parks here, but all of the Disney ecosystem in general, is based on raising the prices, regardless of inflation, on devoted adult superfans and pricing out anyone else who might have cared. Disney thinks they don't need to care about the quality of the movies anymore. They also don't care about volume of funnel size. They're not trying to reach every child in the world anymore because they're surviving purely on loyalists. These are the Disney adults, and there are equivalents like this that exist across every major franchise. The Star Wars collectors, the Marvel completionists, adults whose identities are so entwined with a corporate-owned financial universe that they organize their vacations, their wardrobes, and their social lives around it. A 2024 survey of self-identified Disney adults found that 71% were aged 25 to 44 years old. 80% of them were female, and 91% expected to remain Disney adults for the rest of their lives. When the majority of your theme park visitors, your merchandise buyers, and your opening weekend audience are adults that are reliving their own childhood rather than kids creating new memories, the franchises and companies themselves are no longer a living, growing cultural force. This is commercially viable right now in the short term, but existentially doomed in the long term. All of these companies, pandering in similar ways, are creating a death spiral. You have Disney adults today, but they're already approaching middle age in economic conditions where wealth expansion doesn't exist. Eventually, even the Disney adults will be priced out. Actually, they already are, taking out copious amounts of debt to make their pilgrimages to hug Winnie the Pooh. You know, it's not the kids' fault they stopped caring, though. These companies and studios have spent the last decade perfecting the tactic of villainizing the customer. Kids didn't stop engaging with entertainment. They didn't lose the capacity for wonder or the desire for characters to love. They just went somewhere else. They went to Roblox, which now has over 150 million daily active users, a 69% increase in a single year. Nearly 40 million of those users are under 13 years old, which is a scary statistic considering Roblox keeps getting outed for being a dangerous place for kids. They went to Minecraft, which has sold over 350 million copies, making it the best-selling video game in history, and it maintains over 212 million monthly active players. They went to YouTube, which 78% of Gen Alpha children ages 2 to 12 use regularly. That's 2 years old, with 82% of 6 to 9-year-olds calling it their top platform. There are kids all over YouTube. And they also went to TikTok, where 64% of children ages 8 to 12 use daily, despite a minimum age requirement of 13. Minecraft aside, I would say, the rest of these are dangerously concerning. Just as an aside from our main thesis here, parents, get involved with your kids. The average American child ages 8 to 12 now spends 4 hours and 44 minutes per day on screens. Of course, that's more than any generation at that age ever, and the characters they are encountering in these spaces are less Buzz and Woody and more like influencers. Gen Alpha doesn't build identity around characters the way previous generations did. They build identity around creators and platforms. Almost half of Gen Alpha children say they trust their favorite online influencers as much as their own family members when it comes to product recommendations. These kids don't have heroes like Spider-Man or Luke Skywalker. Their heroes are YouTubers and Roblox developers because those are the places that are directly reaching kids where they are. In a lot of ways, it feels dangerous and predatory, and it is. Like, again, this is real talk here. YouTube and Roblox have curated their platforms to incentivize creators to make content that appeals specifically to children so that children flock to their platforms, bringing us to what would have to be an obvious conclusion here. Children are no longer forming lifelong bonds with franchise-focused fiction characters. They're forming them with corporate mouthpiece content creators. Disney and companies like it have abandoned trying to reach kids with their products. They're not innovating to catch up with them either. So instead, with a gap in the market share, YouTube, Roblox, and Fortnite have weaseled in. So, okay, Perhaps the franchise model might be extremely weak and fading fast, but just because Disney and Warner and Paramount can't connect with the youths of today, that doesn't mean all companies can't. In April 2025, a Minecraft movie opened to 163 million domestically and 313 million globally, the largest debut of the year and the largest opening in video game adaptation history. It went on to gross nearly $1 billion. Critics didn't like it, giving it a 48% on Rotten Tomatoes, but critics don't matter here anymore. Kids loved the movie. It became a viral meme to make fun of this movie, and the film was self-aware enough to know what it was and not overstep its boundaries. And if we roll back a little further to April 2023, the Super Mario Bros. Movie opened to 204 million domestically, and it went on to earn 1.4 billion worldwide, becoming the 6th highest grossing animated film in history and the 2nd highest among non-Disney Pixar films. Critics gave it 59% on Rotten Tomatoes, and again, the critics don't matter here. They're part of the old system. Critic reviews appeal to Gen X and millennial viewers. Gen Z and younger don't care what conventional critics have to say. And now, we see the Super Mario Galaxy movie opening in theaters with projections of 175 to 200 million domestically. If it performs in line with the first film, Mario will become the 3rd animation franchise in history to produce $2 billion films. All 3 of these movies are made with kids in mind. Substance of the films aside, they're made to appeal to the Gen Alpha viewers, for however good or bad that might be. And that brings us into a discussion point that I don't want to confirm because I have personal gripes with the company, but I have to confirm because it's just a fact now. Nintendo is crushing it. Earlier, I said that YouTube and Fortnite have weaseled their way in to appeal to kids where Disney has become passive. Nintendo, which always appealed to kids and families, has not been passive at all, in fact doubling down in attempts to continue the generational appeals similar to what Disney once had. Nintendo's position in the entertainment landscape is structurally unique in a way that no comparison to Disney or Marvel or Warner Brothers quite captures. Nintendo's primary product is a video game console. A video game console is worthless if the next generation of 7-year-olds doesn't want one. Unlike Disney, which can sustain itself on impulse purchases and park revenue from childless millennials, Nintendo literally goes bankrupt if kids stop caring about its characters. The company is structurally forced to earn the love of every new generation in a way that film studios are not anymore, putting Nintendo in a position where they're incentivized to meet kids as customers where they are. And because of this, Nintendo has built something that no other entertainment company on Earth currently possesses: an unbroken chain of emotional connection across 3 living generations, all organic, all built on active engagement rather than passive viewership. They're not going to like me saying this, but millennials now in their 30s and 40s are locked in through what can only be described as nostalgic blind loyalty. They grew up on the Super Nintendo, the N64, the GameCube. Mario, Zelda, and Pokemon are more than franchises to them, building identities around being a Nintendo fan. These people will show up for anything Nintendo makes because it connects them to their childhood. Nintendo fans are the Disney adults of gaming. Then if we look at Gen Z, who are now in their teens and 20s, they all grew up on the Wii, the DS, and the early Switch era. They have their own distinct Nintendo memories. They don't need to borrow their parents' nostalgia, and that brings us to Gen Alpha. The kids right now are playing Mario Kart, Splatoon, and Pokemon Scarlet and Violet as their first real gaming experiences. And the Mario Galaxy movies are made specifically with these kids in mind. They're not being told why Mario matters like we're doing with Luke Skywalker, because they don't have to. They like Mario because Nintendo has kept Mario relevant for 3 generations. No other franchise in entertainment has successfully achieved this. And the company is building outward from that foundation with a deliberateness that looks, in retrospect, like the most patient corporate strategy of the century. The first Super Mario Bros. Movie grossed $1.4 billion and established that Nintendo's characters could very much carry a film, with a Zelda live-action movie in development right now. Meanwhile, Super Nintendo World at Universal Studios has expanded from its 2021 opening in Japan to Hollywood in 2023 and Epic Universe in 2025, with a Singapore location being developed as we speak. Nintendo has a design philosophy that Hollywood has abandoned: accessibility. Mario and pals don't require lore homework. It's approachable for all ages, from all over the world. You don't need to know the lore from 20 years ago to understand the plumbers are the good guys and the dragon turtle is a bad guy. But Nintendo isn't the hero of this story. Yeah, Nintendo is a business juggernaut, but they're not the good guys. They're just smart business people. This is not some benevolent steward of childhood imagination filling the void left behind by Hollywood. It's a conglomerate and a publisher, a fiercely protective and ruthless one at that. Nintendo's record on fan engagement and consumer rights is, well, to put it charitably, hostile. The company is constantly suing and CDing creators and fans who try to preserve Nintendo's library, making accessibility to games that are no longer sold on retail markets difficult to find and extremely expensive on aftermarkets. In 2025, with the Switch 2, Nintendo attempted to push the price of their first-party games to $80 with Mario Kart World. They also announced a policy allowing them access to remotely brick modified Switch and Switch 2 consoles that they deemed to be used illegitimately, and also moved their company towards the game key card model, which has users purchasing physical editions of games that don't have the game data stored on the cartridges anymore. As a lifelong Nintendo fan with Pokemon and Fire Emblem as some of my favorite gaming franchises ever, there is a philosophical contradiction at the heart of this company's empire. Nintendo makes good products in an age where, shockingly, that is difficult to find, but they simultaneously crush fan engagement with legal force and actively engage in anti-consumer behavior, treating their community's enthusiasm as a threat to be managed rather than a force that should be cultivated. Nintendo protects the product with extraordinary care and attacks the community with extraordinary aggression. Winning the throne does not mean you're a good king. So yes, Hollywood has failed to appeal to kids today, opening the door for predatory companies like Roblox to seep in and become a foundational part of kids' early lives. Companies like Nintendo know what they're doing, dangling the carrot of good experiences on a stick while running towards the cliff, and they have no issue having their fans run right off of it. But there is yet still one dimension of this story we have to address. Japan's anime industry reached record revenues of $25 billion in 2024, with more than half of that revenue coming from outside of Japan. The growth was driven almost entirely by international audiences discovering and embracing Japanese animation at a scale that would have been unimaginable a decade ago. The anime film Demon Slayer Infinity Castle grossed $780 million worldwide in 2025 on an estimated production budget of just $20 million. To put that into perspective, it outgrossed both of that year's MCU films on a fraction of the budget, and with an audience that skews dramatically younger than the typical Marvel viewer. In Japan's own market, domestic films now command 76% of the country's box office, with Hollywood imports accounting for the other 24%. The president of Toho, the company that owns Godzilla and Japan's largest studio, observed that the pandemic may have permanently broken the habit of Japanese audiences watching Hollywood films either at home or in movie theaters, implying that the shift to streaming in the West is a Western trend. If we're to take these claims at face value, this means the Western-based companies have lost Western-based children and children at large around the world. Younger audiences on a global scale are gravitating towards Japanese entertainment found in anime, Pokemon, manga, Nintendo, and Godzilla. The cultural stranglehold that Hollywood maintained for a century is washing away, and the beneficiaries, on one side, are Japanese entertainment companies, and on the other side, are YouTube and Roblox. So, when we put all of that into perspective, at the end here, this isn't really a story about box office numbers or corporate strategy or which company is winning the entertainment wars. Sure, that stuff is fun to talk about, but more importantly, what matters is what's happening to kids today and childhoods themselves. Each one of you watching this had a character. You had someone. Maybe it was Luke Skywalker, or Simba, or Woody, or Ash Ketchum, or maybe it was Harry Potter. Someone fictional who taught you something real before you were old enough to know what you were being taught. You learned that fear is worth facing, that doing the right thing is hard and you should do it anyway. Yeah, the teachers in the classrooms might have talked about these values, or your parents might have lectured you on them, but the stories of those days made you care. The movies and entertainment of that age connected with you because they were made for you. That world no longer exists, and it's been hijacked. And none of this is to say that a company like Disney was something benevolent in the 90s, okay? That's not the point, nor would that be true. The kids growing up right now are the first generation in modern history where the dominant figures in their lives are not fictional characters that happen to include lessons in morality. They're real people built around engagement metrics and corporate pilled narratives. The kids of today don't have Woody. They have a YouTuber who might talk about how much they love Chipotle on stream because Chipotle is paying them to talk about loving Chipotle. Their Hercules, let's say, is a Roblox developer who talks about how much they love playing with a Logitech keyboard because Logitech is paying them to promote Logitech keyboards. And I'm not saying that every content creator is cynical or every platform is evil, though many of them are. However, it's an influencer's job to hold your attention. We are watching an entire generation grow up with an abundance of influencers and data analysis platforms studying their every single move to figure out how to better control them, instead of kids just watching Beauty and the Beast. And there were companies that were supposed to be providing entertainment, and they gave up. They decided nostalgia was more profitable than imagination, and they'll pay for it when the last standing fans are no longer available to buy. You cannot unlose an audience. The kids who grew up without Star Wars are not going to wake up 25 and suddenly care about lightsabers, and that's on Disney and companies like them for why that happened. But really, why does this matter to you, and why should you care? My friends, if you have kids or nephews or nieces or younger siblings or grandkids, be involved, be present. It is your responsibility now. It was always before, but now more than ever, to pass down stories that have something to say and something to empower them with. I'm not saying you need to have your kids watch Star Wars. That's not the point. I'm saying show them something. Play games with your kids. Read with them. Hollywood may have failed your kids, but you don't have to. Kids are growing up faster these days because exposure to the internet is a terrible thing for kids. It is more important now than maybe ever before for parents and mentors to be involved with the lives of their kids. Put down the phone yourself and be part of your kids' lives. Until next time, create, innovate, inspire others to do so as well, including your own children. And for the love of God, cancel Disney Plus.